The Arab sheikh smirked as he uttered those chilling words, "You have 1 minute to solve this." His challenge hung in the air like a death sentence, but what he never expected was that the maid's daughter would accomplish the impossible, defying all odds and changing the course of history forever. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The Al Masari Innovation Forum stood as a monument to wealth and influence in the heart of Abu Dhabi. Sunlight streamed through vast windows, dancing across gold inlays that traced intricate patterns along marble columns. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen waterfalls from the vaulted ceiling, each prism catching and multiplying the light into thousands of rainbow fragments. The grand atrium buzzed with the quiet confidence of the world's elite. Tech moguls, royal families, and corporate titans mingled in expensive suits and traditional dress, their combined net worth rivaling the GDP of small nations. At the center of this spectacle stood Sheikh Rami al-Fahad, commanding attention without effort. His tailored thobe gleamed white against the polished floor as he gestured toward a glass pedestal. The sheikh's voice carried across the hushed room, a perfect blend of authority and charm that had made him a favorite among international investors. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "I present to you the legendary box of the Falcon." The object itself seemed almost humble compared to its surroundings. An ornate wooden cube, inlaid with mother-of-pearl and brass, small enough to fit in 2 hands. Yet the reverence with which Rami unveiled it suggested something far more significant than its appearance. "For 7 generations, this puzzle has protected the secrets of my family," the sheikh continued. "Many brilliant minds have attempted to unlock it. All have failed." Amira Nassif slipped through a side entrance, clutching a manila folder to her chest. The 23-year-old daughter of palace maid Layla Nassif had no invitation to this gathering of power and privilege. Her plain linen blouse and worn jeans marked her as an outsider among designer labels and bespoke tailoring. She had come only to deliver her mother's forgotten employment documents, intending to leave immediately and unnoticed. Yet something about the box caught her attention. While the assembled guests murmured appreciatively at the sheikh's presentation, Amira found herself drawn to the puzzle's design. The pattern of inlays wasn't merely decorative. There was mathematics in those lines, a language of symbols she somehow recognized despite never having seen the box before. The young woman paused near a column, half hidden as she studied the artifact. The crowd's polite skepticism washed around her like water around a stone. These were people accustomed to being impressed, yet equally accustomed to the theatrical nature of such displays. But Amira saw beyond the spectacle. In the box's intricate patterns, she sensed something familiar, a message encoded in its very structure, speaking to her across generations. Sheikh Rami al-Fahad's voice carried effortlessly across the grand atrium as he held up the box of the Falcon. "You have 1 minute to solve this," he announced with a smirk that betrayed centuries of aristocratic confidence. His tailored suit gleamed under the crystal chandeliers as he gestured toward the intricate puzzle box, its golden inlays catching the light. Polite laughter rippled through the crowd of dignitaries and tech moguls. They viewed the challenge as merely an entertaining diversion, a bit of theatrical flair from their charismatic host. No one had solved the legendary box in generations. Why would today be different? "The timer begins now," Rami declared, his assistant activating a large digital countdown visible to all guests. 60 seconds appeared on the screen and immediately began to diminish. Amira Nassif stood near the back entrance, clutching her mother's forgotten documents. She had only intended to slip in unnoticed, deliver the papers, and return to the servants' quarters. Yet something about the puzzle box called to her. Patterns within its design sparked connections in her mind, familiar somehow like a half-remembered dream. 50 seconds remained. The wealthy spectators exchanged amused glances. A Saudi prince attempted a half-hearted twist of the box before returning it with a chuckle. 45 seconds. Amira's heart pounded as her feet carried her forward, almost of their own volition. The crowd parted, murmurs of confusion following her approach. In her plain linen blouse and worn jeans, she stood out starkly against the sea of designer attire. "And who might you be?" Rami asked, his tone a mixture of amusement and mild irritation at this unexpected interruption. "Amira," she answered simply, her eyes fixed on the box rather than the man. She extended her hands. 30 seconds. The sheikh hesitated, then placed the ancient puzzle in her palms. The weight of it surprised her, heavier than it appeared, as if burdened with its own secrets. 20 seconds. The room fell silent. Amira's fingers traced the edges and indentations, finding minute pressure points invisible to casual observation. Years of watching, learning, and absorbing knowledge from the palace's shadows had trained her hands for this moment. 10 seconds. She rotated 2 panels simultaneously, then pressed an almost imperceptible seam. 5 seconds. A series of clicks emanated from within the mechanism. 3, 2, 1. The final second ticked away as the box of the Falcon yielded with a decisive click. The crowd gasped collectively as Amira lifted the lid, revealing a yellowed, folded letter nestled within. A document she was never meant to see, but which would forever alter the course of both their lives. Sheikh Rami Al-Fahad's confident smile vanished like a mirage in the desert as Amira Nassif pulled the yellowed letter from the box of the Falcon. The transformation was instantaneous. His eyes widened with recognition, then narrowed with calculation. The grand atrium, moments ago filled with polite applause and laughter, fell into a weighted silence. "Congratulations," the Sheikh managed, his voice betraying the slightest tremor. "No one has opened that puzzle in 3 generations." Amira's fingers trembled as she unfolded the brittle paper. The handwriting was elegant but urgent. The ink faded to a rusty brown. She could feel hundreds of eyes boring into her back as the elite guests craned their necks, their curiosity piqued by the sudden shift in atmosphere. Security personnel moved closer, their earpieces buzzing with urgent communications. "The letter, please." Rami extended his hand, palm up, his voice now hardened with authority. "It's a family heirloom." But Amira had already glimpsed enough to understand what she held. The letter, addressed to Sheikh Rami's grandfather, was signed Nabil Nassif, her own grandfather's name. The words "extraction patent" and "rightful attribution" leapt from the page, sending a jolt through her body. "My grandfather wrote this," she whispered, loud enough for those nearby to hear. The Sheikh's face darkened. "You are mistaken," he said, gesturing more forcefully for the document. "This is a ceremonial message, nothing more." But the damage was done. Whispers rippled through the crowd. A journalist who had been documenting the event stepped forward, smartphone raised. Rami's assistant swiftly moved to block the view, but not before Amira had folded the letter and slipped it into her pocket. Her heart hammered against her ribs as realization dawned. This wasn't merely a puzzle's prize, it was evidence. The letter suggested that the oil extraction technique that had built the Al-Fahad fortune had originally been her grandfather's invention, appropriated without credit or compensation. Layla Nassif, watching from the service entrance, caught her daughter's eye with a look of unmistakable fear. The maid's fingers pressed against her lips in warning, but it was too late. The boundaries between servant and master, between hidden truth and public facade, had already begun to crumble. As security closed in, Amira felt a strange calm descend. The letter in her pocket weighed almost nothing, yet it carried the potential to topple dynasties and rewrite history. A scandal, buried for generations, now rested in her hands, one that could change everything for both families forever. 3 days after the incident at the Al-Masari Innovation Forum, Amira Nassif received a call on her smartphone. The voice on the other end belonged to Khalid, Sheikh Rami Al-Fahad's personal assistant, requesting her presence at the palace's east wing at precisely 2 o'clock that afternoon. No explanation was offered, just the expectation of compliance. When Amira arrived, she was escorted through marble hallways, adorned with ancient calligraphy and modern art, a stark contrast to the servants' quarters, where she had spent countless hours visiting her mother. Khalid led her to an elegantly appointed office where Sheikh Rami sat behind an imposing desk of polished mahogany. "Miss Nassif," he began, his tone surprisingly cordial. "Your performance with the box of the Falcon was unexpected." The Sheikh gestured toward a chair. "Please, sit." What followed sounded like a dream opportunity. Rami spoke of a new institute dedicated to mechanical puzzles and innovation, describing a position created specifically for someone with Amira's unique talents. The salary mentioned was more than she and her mother earned in a year. "You would design challenges for our guests," he explained, sliding a contract across the desk. "Your name would be associated with the finest minds in the Emirates." Amira's initial elation faded as she noticed the document's fine print. The contract included clauses about confidentiality, intellectual property, and most troublingly, a requirement to surrender any artifacts discovered during her employment, including the letter she had found. When she hesitated, the Sheikh's demeanor shifted subtly. "Of course, refusal is your right," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous softness. "However, I should mention that your mother's work permit comes up for renewal next month. These processes can become complicated. The threat hung in the air between them. Amira thought of Layla, how hard she had worked, how much she had sacrificed. Deportation would mean returning to Lebanon with nothing, facing the political instability they had fled years ago. The choice is yours, Rami continued, checking his watch. Though I must say, your mother has been an exemplary employee. It would be unfortunate if her daughter's poor judgment affected her standing. Amira felt the weight of the letter's secrets pressing against her conscience. The knowledge she now possessed, whatever it might fully mean, clearly threatened the Sheikh enough to resort to coercion. Accepting would mean bowing to the very power that sought to silence her family's truth. Refusing could destroy everything her mother had built. I'll need time to consider, she finally managed. Of course, Sheikh Rami replied with a smile that never reached his eyes. You have until tomorrow. I trust you'll make the sensible choice. Amira Nassif's footsteps echoed through the quiet corridor as she made her way back to the servants' wing of the Al Fahad Palace. The events at the Innovation Forum still replayed in her mind. The puzzle box, the letter, Sheikh Rami's face transforming from smug confidence to barely concealed fury. She pushed open the door to the modest quarters she shared with her mother, expecting the familiar comfort of their simple home. Instead, chaos greeted her. Clothes were strewn across the floor, drawers pulled out and emptied, bedding torn from mattresses. Amira froze in the doorway, her breath catching in her throat. Someone had systematically torn apart everything they owned, leaving nothing untouched. The few books they possessed lay scattered, pages bent and covers damaged. "Mom!" she called out, panic rising in her voice as she rushed through the small living space. Relief washed over her when she found Layla in the tiny kitchen, hands trembling as she attempted to restore order to their belongings. "They came while I was working," her mother whispered, dark eyes wide with fear. "I only stepped away for 2 hours to clean the east wing." Amira helped Layla to a chair, noticing how the older woman's fingers kept reaching for her neck, searching for something that wasn't there. "What did they take?" she asked, though she already suspected the answer. "The pendant?" Layla replied, voice breaking. "Your father's pendant. It's the only thing missing." The simple silver pendant had been Layla's most treasured possession, a keepsake from Amira's father who had died years ago. The maid had worn it every day beneath her uniform, removing it only for cleaning and sleeping. Its value was sentimental, not monetary, worthless to anyone but them. "This wasn't a robbery," Amira said quietly, surveying the deliberate destruction around them. "This was a message." Layla nodded, her weathered hands clasping together. "They know you've seen something you shouldn't have." "The box, the letter," she stopped herself, glancing nervously at the door. "We aren't safe here anymore." Amira knelt beside her mother, mind racing. The ransacking of their quarters was a calculated move, a warning that the walls of privilege and secrecy were closing in. Every move she made would be watched, every word recorded, every action scrutinized. "We can't leave," she said, thinking of the job offer that was more threat than opportunity. "And we can't stay silent." Outside their window, the Abu Dhabi skyline glittered with wealth and power. Somewhere in that palace, Sheikh Rami was plotting his next move, perhaps already examining the stolen pendant for secrets he suspected it might contain. "What will we do?" Layla asked, fear and determination mingling in her voice. Amira looked at the chaos around them, the physical manifestation of the disruption she had caused by solving a puzzle in under 1 minute. "We'll find out what they're hiding," she whispered, "and why they're so afraid of us discovering it." The grand oak doors of the palace library swung open before Amira Nassif, their ancient hinges protesting with a soft groan. Her new position, forced upon her through veiled threats, at least granted her this unexpected privilege. She had anticipated rows of leather-bound archives and meticulous records documenting the Al Fahad dynasty's rise to power. What she found instead left her breathless. The library was a labyrinth of curiosities. Glass cases housed ornate artifacts from across the Arab world. Intricate brass astrolabes, carved wooden boxes with sliding panels, and jewel-encrusted compasses. Each item, Amira quickly realized, was more than decorative. They were physical puzzles, knowledge guardians requiring worthy hands to unlock their secrets. "Most visitors see only trinkets," explained the elderly librarian, his voice barely above a whisper. "Sheikh Rami believes true wisdom should be earned, not merely read." The old man shuffled away, leaving her alone among the treasures. Amira ran her fingers along the polished shelves, drawn to a small cedar chest tucked between larger displays. Unlike the ostentatious pieces surrounding it, this box bore simple geometric patterns that reminded her of designs her mother used to sketch. With practiced movements, she manipulated the sliding panels until the lock released with a satisfying click. Inside lay a collection of leather-bound journals, their pages yellowed with age. The handwriting was delicate yet decisive, belonging to Samira Al-Fahad, Rami's great-grandmother. Amira settled into a window alcove, sunlight streaming across the faded ink as she began to read. Hours dissolved as she pored over the journals. What emerged was a story dramatically different from the official narrative. Samira wrote of a brilliant engineer named Nabil Nassif, who had approached the family with a revolutionary oil drilling technique. The innovation had transformed the Al-Fahad fortunes overnight, catapulting them from regional merchants to global powers. Amira's hands trembled as she read the name again. Nassif, her own surname. The inventor who had launched the dynasty's wealth was none other than her grandfather. One passage stood out starkly. Nabil deserved recognition beyond the pittance paid. My husband insists our family name must stand alone on the patent. I fear this decision will haunt generations to come. The young woman closed the journal, heart pounding against her ribs. The pendant her mother treasured, the one now missing. Could it be connected? The Al-Fahad empire, with its gleaming skyscrapers and global investments, had been built on her family's innovation, their legacy stolen and buried. Footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. Quickly, Amira returned the journals to their hiding place, mind racing with implications. She was no longer just fighting for her mother's security. She was reclaiming a birthright that had been denied for generations. The ancient city of Petra glowed amber under the setting sun as limousines and luxury vehicles delivered the world's elite to Sheikh Rami Al-Fahad's Innovation Summit. Carved into rose-colored stone, the venue blended modern technology with timeless architecture, a perfect backdrop for the spectacle Rami had orchestrated to cement his family's legacy. This summit will redefine our future, Rami announced to reporters, his tailored suit gleaming with subtle gold threads as cameras flashed around him. The charismatic ruler had spared no expense, flying in tech moguls, energy ministers, and royal families from across the globe. His presentation, scheduled as the summit's centerpiece, promised to unveil a revolutionary energy initiative that would further entrench the Al-Fahad dynasty in global innovation. Behind the scenes, Amira Nassif moved carefully through service corridors. She had secured temporary access by volunteering to help with the technical arrangements, a position beneath notice for someone of her status. The daughter of a palace maid now walked with purpose, carrying what appeared to be routine equipment. "The presentation files are in his private suite," Tariq whispered as they passed in a hallway. The loyal chauffeur had driven Rami's entourage to Petra and used his position to map the security protocols. "You'll have exactly 7 minutes while he's greeting the Jordanian ministers." Amira nodded, her heart pounding as she slipped into the suite. The digital presentation device sat unguarded on an ornate desk. With trembling fingers, she connected her smartphone and executed the swap, replacing Rami's carefully crafted narrative with translated excerpts from the letter she'd discovered in the box of the Falcon. "Did you manage it?" Tariq asked when they reconvened near the kitchen area, his eyes darting nervously toward the security personnel. "It's done," she confirmed, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "The truth about my grandfather's invention will be seen by everyone." That evening, as hundreds of influential guests filled the auditorium, Rami took the stage with characteristic confidence. When he activated the presentation, however, his expression shifted from assurance to confusion. Instead of his planned content, the screens displayed the damning evidence: Nabil Nassif's original designs, dates of submission, and correspondence proving the Al-Fahad fortune was built on stolen innovation. The audience murmured as Rami fumbled to regain control. By morning, social media buzzed with speculation. Financial analysts questioned the foundation of the Al-Fahad empire, and journalists began digging into previously untouchable family history. Watching from her modest hotel room in Jordanian dinars, Amira knew there was no turning back. The truth had been unleashed, and not even Sheikh Rami's wealth could contain it now. The crowd from the Petra summit had dispersed, leaving Amira Nassif alone, with her thoughts in the hotel lobby. Her impromptu revelation during Sheikh Rami's presentation had caused exactly the stir she'd hoped for. Confused murmurs, shocked gasps, and most importantly, questions that would not easily be dismissed. She watched as international reporters huddled in corners, frantically typing on their smartphones. "Quite the performance," came a smooth voice from behind her. Amira turned to find an elegantly dressed woman extending a business card. "Farida Al-Zahir, The woman introduced herself. "I've been watching you with great interest." Amira accepted the card cautiously. The name was familiar. Farida was one of the Gulf's most prominent investors, known for backing innovative technologies. "I'm not sure what you want from me," Amira replied. "What I want," Farida said, lowering her voice, "is to continue what your father started." The mention of her father sent a jolt through Amira's body. "You knew him." Farida gestured toward a secluded corner of the lobby. Once seated, she revealed knowledge that only someone intimately connected to the Nassif family could possess. "Your father was brilliant, just like your grandfather Nabil. Their vision extended far beyond what the Al-Fahad family has allowed the world to see." "Why are you telling me this?" Amira asked, suspicion mixing with curiosity. "Because there's more," Farida explained, her perfectly manicured fingers tracing patterns on the table. "The box of the falcon was merely the beginning. There exists a second puzzle, far more complex than the first." "Where?" "Hidden within the Masari Gardens in Abu Dhabi. But it can only be accessed during the vernal equinox, when day and night stand in perfect balance." Amira studied the woman's face, searching for deception. "Why would you help me?" "What do you gain?" Farida's smile remained enigmatic. "Let's just say I have my reasons for wanting to see the Al-Fahad legacy re-examined." As they parted, Farida pressed something into Amira's palm, a small carved stone with markings similar to those on the box of the falcon. "You'll need this," she whispered. "Trust your instincts, just as you did before." Walking back to her room, Amira felt a renewed sense of purpose. The stone felt warm in her hand, almost alive with possibility. For weeks she had felt isolated, hunted, but now she realized she wasn't alone in her quest. Others had been waiting, watching from the shadows, perhaps for years. She messaged Tariq. "We need to talk about the Masari Gardens." The equinox was only 3 weeks away. Whatever secrets lay hidden there had waited generations to be discovered. They could wait a little longer. The palace corridors gleamed under the soft glow of recessed lighting as Tariq Hassan adjusted his chauffeur's cap nervously. He had grown up alongside Amira Nassif, both children of palace staff, but tonight's mission crossed boundaries that could cost him everything. The risk seemed worth it as he watched his childhood friend's determined expression, while they navigated the labyrinthine hallways toward Sheikh Rami's private wing. "The security cameras rotate every 90 seconds, Tariq whispered, guiding Amira behind an ornate column. "We have a small window to reach the study." Amira nodded, her mind racing with memories of her mother clutching that pendant, the last connection to a past Layla rarely discussed. When they reached the antechamber to the Sheikh's private study, she felt her heart hammering against her ribs. "It will be in his personal safe," she murmured, "behind the painting of the falcon." The chauffeur raised an eyebrow. "How could you possibly know that?" "My mother cleaned these rooms for 15 years. She notices things. The study itself was a testament to wealth. Leather-bound books lining mahogany shelves, a desk carved from a single slab of rare wood. Amira moved directly to the painting, her fingers tracing its gilded frame until she found the hidden latch. The safe appeared, its digital keypad glowing faintly. "We'll never crack that," Tariq hissed, glancing nervously at his watch. Amira smiled slightly. "The Sheikh uses the same pattern for everything. It's the date the Al-Fahad dynasty began." Her fingers danced across the keypad and the safe clicked open. Inside, nestled among documents and jewelry, lay her mother's pendant, a simple silver oval on a thin chain. Amira grabbed it, relief washing over her face as they retreated from the room. Only when they reached the relative safety of the servants' stairwell did she examine the pendant closely. "Something's different," she whispered, her fingers finding a nearly invisible seam along its edge. With careful pressure, the pendant split open, revealing not the expected photograph, but a tightly wound microfilm reel. "What is that?" Tariq asked, leaning closer. "I think—" Amira's voice trembled. "I think it's everything. My grandfather's inventions, formulas, proof of what was stolen from our family." The chauffeur's eyes widened. "This is why they ransacked your quarters." Amira nodded, carefully resealing the pendant and slipping it around her neck. "This isn't just jewelry. It's our legacy, hidden in plain sight all these years." She clutched her friend's hand. "Tariq, this changes everything. The Al-Fahad fortune was built on my grandfather's genius." "What will you do now?" he asked. Amira's fingers closed protectively around the pendant. "First, I need to find a microfilm reader. Then, we make the truth known." The palace corridors felt suffocating as Amira Nassif rushed to her mother's quarters, the weight of recent discoveries pressing down on her shoulders. She found Layla sitting on the edge of her small bed, hands trembling as she clutched a worn photograph. "They're coming for us," Layla whispered, her voice barely audible. "I should have told you everything years ago." The dim light cast long shadows across the room as Layla Nassif finally revealed the truth she had guarded for 2 decades. Amira's father hadn't died in a random accident as she'd been told. He had been silenced while protecting Nabil Nassif's final creation, a revolutionary extraction method that would have made oil drilling environmentally sustainable. "Your grandfather was brilliant beyond his time," Layla explained, her eyes distant with memory. "The technology he developed could have transformed the industry, but powerful interests saw it as a threat to their profits." Amira sat beside her mother, their shoulders touching as the older woman continued her confession. "Before I was a palace maid, I was an engineering prodigy in Beirut. I graduated top of my class." A bitter smile crossed her face. "Your grandfather recruited me himself." The revelation stunned Amira. She had never imagined her mother, whose hands were now calloused from years of service, had once designed complex systems alongside one of the greatest inventors in the region. "When they came after your father, I knew we would be next," Layla continued. "I abandoned everything, my research, my career, my identity, to keep you safe. The only way was to disappear into plain sight, to become invisible." Tears welled in Amira's eyes as she understood the magnitude of her mother's sacrifice. "Why didn't you tell me? Knowledge is dangerous," the older woman replied, squeezing her daughter's hand. "I thought if you knew nothing, they would leave you alone. I never imagined you would solve the box of the Falcon." Outside their window, the Abu Dhabi skyline glittered with wealth built upon her family's stolen legacy. Amira thought of Sheikh Rami, of his arrogance and the empire he had inherited, an empire founded on her grandfather's genius. "There's more," Layla said, reaching beneath her mattress to extract a thin folder. "This contains coordinates to where your grandfather hid his final blueprints. I've memorized them, but never dared to retrieve them." As mother and daughter embraced in the small servants' room, Amira felt a new determination rising within her. The Al-Fahad dynasty had buried her family's contributions for generations, but the truth refused to stay hidden. "We won't run anymore," Amira promised, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "It's time the world knew what was stolen from us." Sheikh Rami Al-Fahad wasted no time. Within 48 hours of discovering Amira's investigations, he orchestrated a calculated media assault that spread through Abu Dhabi like wildfire. At a hastily arranged press conference in the gilded east wing of his palace, the sheikh stood before a wall of cameras, his normally charismatic demeanor replaced by cold fury. "It pains me to announce that a trusted employee has betrayed the hospitality of this household," he declared, voice steady but eyes flashing with anger. "Amira Nassif has not only stolen classified documents, but fabricated outrageous claims about my family's legacy." By evening, every news outlet in the Emirates carried the story. Headlines screamed accusations: "Palace infiltrator exposed, Maid's daughter steals state secrets." The palace released carefully edited security footage showing Amira in the library, conveniently omitting that she had permission to be there. Layla returned from her shift to find reporters camped outside their modest quarters in the servants' wing. The normally composed woman trembled as she pushed through the crowd, refusing to answer questions about her daughter's crimes or their family's past in Lebanon. "They're painting us as spies," Amira whispered that night, sitting on the edge of her mother's bed. "How can we fight this? He owns every newspaper, every television station." Her mother's eyes, usually warm with reassurance, now reflected only fear. "The work permits," Layla said softly. "He's already had them flagged for review." The threat was clear. Without valid permits, they would face immediate deportation, back to a country they barely remembered. With no resources and no connections, Tariq managed to slip into their quarters through a service entrance, bringing news from inside the palace walls. "The Sheikh has ordered all staff to report any contact with you," he explained, keeping his voice low. "Everyone's afraid. Even those who've known you for years won't acknowledge you now." The following morning, Amira found her university access revoked, her small consulting contracts canceled one by one. Their bank accounts were frozen pending investigation of financial irregularities. "He's erasing us," Amira realized, watching her mother sort through their meager possessions, preparing for the worst. Not just our future, our entire past. Yet even as their world collapsed around them, Amira felt the weight of the pendant against her chest, hidden beneath her clothes. The compass inside pointed toward a truth that couldn't be buried by headlines or threats. Sheikh Rami might control the narrative now, but the evidence she'd gathered wasn't just about clearing their names. It was about reclaiming a legacy that belonged to generations. The Desert Rose Gala glittered under the magnificent chandeliers of Abu Dhabi's most exclusive hotel. Amira Nassif stood at the entrance, her simple navy dress a stark contrast to the opulence surrounding her. Despite the public smear campaign Sheikh Rami Al Fahad had orchestrated against her, surprising invitation had arrived 3 days ago, an opportunity to address the accusations before the Emirates elite. "Quite brave of you to show your face," whispered a woman in diamonds as Amira passed. The maid's daughter kept her chin high, fingers clutching the small velvet pouch Tariq had smuggled to her that morning. Her childhood friend had risked everything to retrieve this piece of evidence. From across the room, Sheikh Rami watched her with calculated interest. The ruler had arranged this spectacle, confident that public humiliation would finally silence her claims. When he approached the microphone, the crowd hushed instantly. "Tonight we have a special demonstration," he announced, his charismatic voice filling the hall. "Ms. Nassif claims extraordinary abilities with puzzles. Let us see if she can solve one without stealing documents first." Laughter rippled through the audience as Amira was escorted to the stage. Before her sat a glass case containing a modified version of the original puzzle box. This one designed to be impossible. "You have 3 minutes," Rami declared, louder than necessary. "Surely enough time for such a prodigy." Amira's hands moved with practiced precision, her mind recalling patterns from Layla's old notebooks. The crowd leaned forward as her fingers worked the intricate mechanism. With 30 seconds remaining, the box clicked open. But instead of removing the expected token, she reached into her pouch and inserted a small cylindrical object into the box's hidden compartment. Pressing a concealed button, she stepped back as crackling audio filled the ballroom. "I, Nabil Nassif, record this testimony on the 15th of March, 1972. The voice, aged but clear, echoed through the stunned silence. "My extraction method was never meant to build empires of greed, but to serve humanity. The Al Fahad family has corrupted my life's work. I forgive them, but history must know the truth." The recording continued, detailing specific patents and dates that matched the microfilm evidence. Sheikh Rami's face drained of color as whispers erupted throughout the gala. Journalists frantically typed on their devices while investors exchanged concerned glances. When the audio ended, Amira simply bowed and walked off stage. The applause that followed was scattered, uncertain, the sound of a carefully constructed narrative beginning to crumble under the weight of long-buried truth. Amira Nassif sat cross-legged on the floor of her small room in the servants' quarters, surrounded by papers and sketches. The puzzle she had solved in under a minute at the Al-Masari Innovation Forum kept replaying in her mind. There was something hauntingly familiar about its intricate pattern of interlocking gears and symbols. She reached for an old cardboard box beneath her bed, pulling out her mother's weathered notebook. Layla had kept detailed journals since before Amira was born, filled with sketches, equations, and memories from her days as an engineering prodigy in Lebanon. As Amira flipped through the yellowed pages, her breath caught. There it was, an almost identical design to Sheikh Rami's puzzle, sketched in faded blue ink nearly 20 years ago. "Mom," she called out, her voice barely above a whisper. "Where did this design come from?" Layla entered the room, her eyes widening at the open notebook. She sat beside her daughter, fingers trembling as she traced the drawing. "This was created by Rami's cousin, Khalid," she explained. "A brilliant child who saw patterns where others saw chaos. He died when he was only 9, a rare illness. The Sheikh's family rarely speaks of him." Amira stared at the sketch, trying to process this new connection. "You knew him?" "I worked with his caretakers," Layla said. "Sometimes when no one was watching, I would solve puzzles with him. He created this one specifically for your grandfather Nabil to solve." A sad smile crossed her face. Khalid admired Nabil's work. Even though we were already at odds. The revelation sent Amira's mind spinning. The puzzle that had changed everything wasn't just a test of Sheikh Rami's making. It was a creation born from a child who had bridged both families decades ago. So the box of the falcon, Amira reasoned. It wasn't just about protecting secrets. It was preserving Khalid's memory, too. Layla nodded. The Sheikh's family took the design after Khalid died. They've guarded it jealously ever since, as if it belonged only to them. This connection deepened Amira's resolve. The feud between the families wasn't simply about stolen inventions or wealth. It was built on layers of misunderstood intentions and lost opportunities for reconciliation. The gifted child had tried to create connection where adults had built walls. The puzzle was never meant to divide, Amira whispered, understanding blooming within her. It was meant to bring people together. She carefully closed the notebook, a new determination settling in her heart. This wasn't just about reclaiming her family's legacy anymore. It was about healing a rift that had claimed too many dreams across generations. Under the warm glow of her bedside lamp, Amira Nassif turned her mother's pendant over in her palm. The small silver trinket had been a constant in her life. Layla never removed it except when it was stolen. Now, safely recovered from Sheikh Rami's private quarters, Amira examined it with new eyes. "There must be more to this," she whispered, running her fingertip along the ornate edge. The pendant's design featured intricate geometric patterns, typical of traditional Arabic craftsmanship, but something felt different. Pressing gently on the center stone, Amira gasped as it clicked and slid sideways, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside lay not just the microfilm they'd discovered earlier, but something else, a miniature compass, no larger than her thumbnail. The delicate instrument still worked perfectly, its needle quivering before settling toward magnetic north. "Tariq, look at this," she called to her childhood friend who sat nearby, keeping watch at her door. The chauffeur moved closer, his eyes widening at the discovery. "Your mother kept this hidden all these years," he said, voice hushed with reverence. "But why a compass?" Amira's mind raced back to Farida al-Zahir's words about the second puzzle in the Masari Gardens. The mysterious investor had mentioned something about alignment and the vernal equinox. Suddenly, the connection crystallized in her thoughts. "The second puzzle isn't just in the gardens, it's aligned with cardinal directions," she explained, excitement building in her voice. "This compass isn't just a tool, it's the key itself." That night, Amira spread out the few documents she'd collected, photocopies from the journals, notes from her mother's confessions, and sketches of patterns she'd observed in the palace library. Each piece alone seemed insignificant, but together they formed a constellation of clues. Our entire history has been hiding in plain sight, she realized. Not in archives or databases, but in everyday objects we carried with us. The compass represented more than direction. It symbolized her family's journey, their displacement, and their eventual return to claim what was rightfully theirs. Her grandfather Nabil had encoded his legacy not in writing that could be destroyed, but in objects that could be passed down through generations. Dawn was breaking when Amira finally understood. The compass would guide her through the Masari Gardens' maze-like pathways, revealing the correct route only when aligned with specific landmarks at the precise angle of the equinox sun. "Ancestral wisdom," she murmured, clasping the pendant around her neck once more. They knew someday someone would need to find the truth. For the first time since solving the box of the falcon, Amira felt not just determined but guided, as if her grandfather's hand was directing her through time itself, using nothing more complex than a tiny needle, pointing true north. The night air felt unusually cool as Amira Nassif and Tariq sat in the palace gardens, their voices hushed beneath the rustling date palms. The chauffeur's normally composed demeanor had given way to nervous energy as he recounted what he'd witnessed 3 nights earlier. "I was returning from a late airport pickup," Tariq explained, fidgeting with his uniform cuff. "I heard voices from the East Wing study, Sheikh Rami and your mother. They weren't arguing exactly, but there was intensity." Amira leaned forward. "My mother was speaking with Rami?" "Alone. Yes. I couldn't hear everything, but Rami mentioned something about family obligations and what your father would have wanted. Your mother responded that blood doesn't always determine loyalty." He paused, watching her reaction carefully. "Amira, I think there's more connecting your families than just the inventions." She sat back, mind racing. The revelation cast everything in a new light. Her mother's reluctance to leave the palace despite better opportunities elsewhere. Rami's personal interest in their situation rather than simply delegating it to security personnel. What other secrets had been kept from her? "There's something else," Tariq added. "When your mother mentioned your grandfather Nabil, Rami didn't look angry. He looked guilty." Before Amira could process this information, her phone vibrated with a message from Farida Al-Zahir requesting an urgent meeting at the marina. An hour later, Amira found the investor standing alone at the pier's edge, the city lights reflecting off the dark water. Something about Farida's posture suggested vulnerability, a stark contrast to her usual commanding presence. "I haven't been entirely truthful with you," Farida began without preamble. "My interest in your situation isn't purely professional or ethical." The elegant woman turned, her features illuminated by moonlight. "Rami Al-Fahad is my half-brother. We share a father, but my mother was not his wife. When I was born, the family arranged for our disappearance, with generous financial compensation, of course, but no recognition." Amira's breath caught. "You're an Al-Fahad?" "By blood, not by name or inheritance," Farida replied bitterly. "I've spent my life building my own fortune, watching from the shadows as my half-brother inherited everything. When I heard about you opening the box of the Falcon, I recognized an opportunity for justice, not just for your family, but for mine as well." The revelation transformed everything. What Amira had thought was a simple case of historical theft had evolved into a complex web of family secrets, hidden connections, and personal vendettas spanning generations. "So your help comes with conditions," Amira stated, not as an accusation but as a realization. Farida's gaze softened. "My motives may be personal, but my belief in your cause is genuine. Sometimes justice serves multiple purposes." In the hushed sanctuary of the palace library, Amira Nassif sat cross-legged on the ornate carpet surrounded by fragments of history. The letter from the box of the Falcon lay before her, its aged paper revealing secrets in faded ink. She traced her fingers over her grandfather's handwriting, feeling a connection that transcended time. "It was never about money," she whispered to Tariq, who stood guard by the door. "Nabil wasn't seeking compensation. He was offering partnership." The letter, dated nearly 60 years ago, detailed her grandfather's revolutionary oil extraction technique and proposed a collaborative venture with Sheikh Rami's grandfather. The technology would have benefited both families and transformed the region's approach to natural resources. But pride and greed had intervened. The Al-Fahad patriarch had dismissed the offer, later claiming the innovation as his own. "They could have changed everything together," Amira said, her voice tight with emotion. "Instead, one family rose while the other fell." Tariq moved closer, his eyes scanning the shelves around them. But why hide this letter in a puzzle that could be solved? Why risk exposure? The answer came to Amira as she surveyed the library's collection. What had initially appeared to be merely decorative artifacts, intricate wooden boxes, metallic spheres, and jeweled containers, suddenly revealed their true purpose. "This isn't just a library," she realized. "It's an archive of secrets." Each ornament concealed a puzzle. Each puzzle protected a truth. The Al-Fahad dynasty had preserved their history not in vulnerable documents that could be stolen or destroyed, but in challenges that required wisdom and perception to unlock. "They never expected anyone outside the family to solve them," she said, rising to examine a copper astrolabe. "Especially not the daughter of a palace maid." As Amira explored, further she discovered markings on several artifacts that matched patterns in her mother's pendant. These weren't random decorations, but a sophisticated system of knowledge preservation, ensuring only those with both intelligence and proper guidance could access the family's deepest secrets. "Your grandfather knew this system," Tariq observed. "That's why he created the box of the Falcon. He was speaking their language, offering his innovation in a form they would respect." Amira nodded, a new understanding dawning. "And now I've unlocked what was meant to stay hidden for generations." She carefully refolded the letter, knowing its contents would forever change her path forward. The truth about her heritage wasn't just a personal revelation, it was a challenge to the very foundation of the Al-Fahad Empire, a truth that could no longer remain encoded in golden puzzles. The news reached Amira Nassif through an unexpected source, a formal letter delivered by a solemn-faced representative of the Emirates Banking Authority. The document, bearing gold-embossed seals, detailed something so extraordinary that she read it 3 times before beginning to believe its contents. "This makes no sense," she whispered to Tariq as they sat in the servants' courtyard, the paper trembling in her hands. "According to this, I'm entitled to 17% of the Al-Fahad family trust." Her childhood friend leaned closer, his eyes widening as he scanned the document. The ancestral trust clause. I've heard whispers about this among the older staff. It's real. The clause, buried deep within the founding documents of the Alfahad dynasty, had been crafted generations ago as a safeguard against theft of intellectual property. Any outsider who legitimately solved the box of the Falcon puzzle in public would trigger an automatic recognition of their connection to the original inventors. The family had been so confident in the puzzle's impenetrability that they'd never bothered to remove the provision. Across the palace, Sheikh Rami paced his private office, crystal tumbler in hand. The family lawyers had confirmed what he'd feared. The public solving of the ancestral puzzle had activated dormant legal mechanisms beyond his control. Tradition, the very foundation of his authority, had turned against him. "Can we challenge this?" he demanded, voice echoing against marble walls. His chief counsel shook his head. The clause is binding under both Emirates law and tribal custom. To challenge it would undermine the very legitimacy of your family's claim to leadership. For Amira, the inheritance represented more than wealth. It was validation, proof that her grandfather's contributions had been real and significant. Yet it also complicated everything. Accepting would forever change her relationship with Layla and their community. That evening, Farida al-Zahir arrived unannounced at the servants' quarters, her expensive perfume incongruous among the simple surroundings. "You've received the notification," she stated, not a question. Amira nodded. "Did you know this would happen?" "I suspected," Farida admitted, "but I didn't orchestrate it. Some justice transcends even the most careful planning." The next morning, Amira was summoned to Rami's private study, not as a servant's daughter, but as a recognized heiress. The sheikh stood by the window, his silhouette framed against Abu Dhabi's glittering skyline. "You've upset generations of careful balance," he said without turning. "I never sought your family's money," she replied. "Perhaps not," he conceded, finally facing her. "But you found something more dangerous, the truth." In that moment, Amira realized that wealth was merely a symbol. The real inheritance was the responsibility that came with it, and the power to finally set things right. The truth hit Amira like a physical blow. She sat motionless in Farida al-Zahir's private office, staring at the faded photograph on the sleek glass desk. The man in the image, older, with a different name, and a life rebuilt from nothing, was unmistakably her father. "He's alive?" Amira whispered, her fingers trembling as they traced the outline of his face. "All these years, my mother told me he died in an accident when I was 3. Farida nodded solemnly. "Ibrahim Nassif didn't die. He disappeared to protect you both." The investor slid a folder across the desk containing documentation of threats made against Amira's father after he refused to surrender Nabil's research. "When powerful people realized he possessed knowledge of your grandfather's sustainable extraction method, they gave him an impossible choice. The pieces began falling into place." Amira recalled her mother's inexplicable sadness on certain dates, the way Layla would sometimes stare at empty doorways as if expecting someone to walk through. It hadn't been grief alone, it had been hope, carefully hidden. "He's been living in Tunisia under the name Malik Ben Ali," Farida continued, "working as an engineering professor at a small university, deliberately keeping a low profile. He's never stopped watching over you from afar." Amira's mind raced through childhood memories, reframing them with this new knowledge. "There was a man at my school performances, always at the back, always leaving before the crowds." Her eyes widened. "And the anonymous scholarship that paid for my university studies." "Your father has sacrificed everything to keep you safe," Farida confirmed. "But now, with what you've uncovered about the Alfahad legacy, it's finally possible for him to emerge from hiding." That evening, in a secure video call arranged by Farida, Amira faced her father for the first time in 20 years. Ibrahim's eyes, so like her own, filled with tears as they spoke. He explained how he had tracked her achievements from afar, how he had channeled funds through untraceable accounts to support her education, how he had lived with the daily agony of separation. "I wanted to come back so many times," Ibrahim said, his voice breaking, "but as long as those who threatened us remained powerful, my presence would have endangered you both." Amira understood then that her quest for justice wasn't just about reclaiming a stolen legacy. It was about reuniting a family torn apart by greed and fear. As the call ended, she made a silent promise. The final puzzle would be solved, not just for the truth it would reveal, but for the future it would restore. The night air carried whispers of ancient secrets as Amira Nassif traced her finger along the worn parchment. Verses of Bedouin poetry, passed down through generations, aligned perfectly with the constellations overhead. The miniature compass hidden in her mother's pendant vibrated slightly against her palm, confirming she was on the right path. "We're close," she murmured to Farida al-Zahir, who stood beside her at the edge of the forgotten well. The investor, now revealed as Rami's half-sister, nodded silently, her eyes reflecting the same determination that had brought them to this remote corner of the Emirates. Beneath a canopy of stars, Amira descended the stone steps. Years of sand had partially filled the ancient structure, but the markings on the wall remained visible, symbols matching those in her grandfather's journals. Her heart raced as she recognized the pattern. It was the same one she had decoded in the box of the falcon, but inverted and expanded. "This is it," she called up. "The final puzzle." Unlike the ornate mechanisms of the palace collection, this one was elegantly simple, a series of concentric stone rings that needed to be aligned according to the star positions recorded in Nabil's writings. As Amira rotated the weathered stone, she felt the weight of generations in her hands. Her mother had once stood in this very spot with her father, before circumstances tore their family apart. The final ring clicked into place with a sound that echoed through the desert night. The floor beneath them shifted, revealing a narrow staircase descending further into darkness. At the bottom, illuminated by their flashlights, stood a metal vault, modest in appearance, but sealed with a combination lock that responded to the compass in Amira's pendant. Inside lay stacks of blueprints, their edges yellowed with age, but their contents startlingly visionary. "This is incredible," Farida whispered, carefully unfolding the largest schematic. "Sustainable energy technology that doesn't deplete resources, designed to work with the desert environment, not against it." Amira recognized her mother's handwriting alongside her grandfather's. The dates on the papers revealed a truth that took her breath away. These designs predated current clean energy solutions by nearly a century. "They were so far ahead of their time," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "And the world wasn't ready." As dawn broke over the dunes, Amira gathered the blueprints. These weren't just family heirlooms, they were a bridge between generations, connecting the wisdom of her ancestors with the urgent needs of the present. In her hands lay not just her family's vindication, but perhaps the region's sustainable future. The desert wind seemed to whisper approval as she emerged from the well, carrying the legacy that had waited so patiently to be found. The morning sun bathed the courtyard in golden light as Amira Nassif moved among the tables where 20 children from Abu Dhabi's underserved neighborhoods hunched over mechanical puzzles. Her fingers guided a young girl's hands, demonstrating how to align the intricate gears of a miniature version of the Falcon box. "The solution is never about force," she explained, her voice gentle yet firm. "It's about understanding patterns that connect us to those who came before." The Nabil Nassif Foundation for Innovation had transformed what was once a neglected corner of the city into a haven of learning. 6 months ago, when the lawyers had presented Amira with documents confirming her right to a substantial portion of the Al Fahad fortune, she had shocked them all by declining. Instead, she redirected the funds to establish this center, honoring her grandfather's legacy in a way no personal wealth ever could. "Miss Amira, I did it!" A boy no older than 10 beamed as his puzzle clicked open, revealing a small scroll with an engineering principle written in both Arabic and English. The young woman smiled, remembering how she had once stood before the world's elite, solving what they thought impossible. Now she found greater joy in watching these children discover their own capabilities. Across the courtyard, Layla chatted with parents, her once hunched posture now straight with pride. The former palace maid had resumed her engineering work, co-leading the Foundation's adult education program. Behind her, Tariq supervised the installation of solar panels, having left his chauffeur position to manage the Foundation's sustainable energy projects. Neither noticed the sleek vehicle that pulled up at the edge of the property, nor the figure who stepped out to observe from a distance. Sheikh Rami al-Fahad watched the scene with complex emotions playing across his face. The public revelation of the ancestral trust clause had forced a reckoning within his family. Though his pride had suffered, something unexpected had emerged from the ashes of his dynasty's secrets, a reluctant respect. The wind picked up, catching Amira's scarf as she demonstrated another puzzle. The fabric fluttered, revealing the pendant around her neck, no longer hidden, no longer a mere vessel for secrets, but worn proudly as a symbol of reclaimed heritage. Farida al-Zahir, now openly acknowledged as Rami's half-sister, emerged from the car to stand beside her brother. "She's built something remarkable," she observed. Rami nodded slowly. "Perhaps this is the legacy our families were meant to share all along." As they turned to leave, Amira looked up, catching sight of them. For a moment their eyes met across the distance, not as adversaries, but as inheritors of a shared history, now writing its next chapter separately, but in parallel.